Some time ago, choir director Ray Ellis sent me an email that was making the rounds on the internet. It's a story about a very proper Southern woman who was arranging a camping trip for her Baptist church. Do you remember that one, Ray? Okay. Mrs. Johnson was writing the campground for reservations, and she wanted to make sure that they had modern facilities. And she couldn't bring herself to write the word toilet, so she decided to use the old-fashioned term bathroom commode. But once she saw the words bathroom commode in print, she still felt uncomfortable about it, so she threw away the letter and started over. This time, she just used the abbreviation BC. Does your campground have its own BC? Meaning, does it have its own bathroom commode? But when the campground owner received the letter, he was all confused. He didn't know what BC meant. And then he realized the letter was on stationery from a Baptist church. So he thought BC meant Baptist church. He wrote back, "Dear Mrs. Johnson, the BC is located 9 miles from the campground in a beautiful grove of trees. I admit it is quite a distance if you are in the habit of going regularly. But the acoustics are very good, as everyone can hear even the quietest of passages." Ray sent me this. "It may interest you to know that my daughter met her husband there. Unfortunately, my wife is ill and has not been able to go in a long time. It's been a good 6 months since she last went. As we grow older, it seems to be more of an effort, especially in cold weather. Perhaps I could accompany you the first time you go, sit with you, and introduce you to all the other folks who will be there. I look forward to your visit." I think the woman fainted after reading the letter. The choir director sent me that. Now you know what choir practice must be like. You know, it's so easy for us to misunderstand each other, for people not to be on the same page. Since this is the start of a new church year, I thought I would talk about who we are as a church. What are we about? What is our purpose or purposes? My wife says that this is called finding your why. W-H-Y, finding your why. Why are you doing what you are doing? Why is it important for you? And those are always good questions to ask ourselves about our own life. And they are good questions for organizations and committees and church communities to ask too. It's good to ask why questions. Why do we do what we do? Why is it important? Well, many of the reasons for why we do church at Asbury, what we're about here, can be revealed by a simple picture, by a symbol, our church logo, a clown. Why do we have a clown for the logo of our church? If you ask someone around here that question, they may respond by saying, well, there was a group of women in the church in the 1970s that called themselves the Busy Bees, and they decided to start making clown dolls as this time of fellowship, and they decided they would sell them too, and they did quite well. The profits for those clown dolls helped pay the bills of the church during its lean years. You might hear that, and that's true. That happened, and the Busy Bees are still making clown dolls. But that's not the reason the Asbury logo is a clown. We wouldn't have a clown as our logo just because the Busy Bees made clown dolls. That's nice, but that's icing on the cake. Others may say, well, we've got a clown because we are the arts church. We like creativity. We have very creative worship services. We have a theater. You know, the first thing we know about God in the Bible is that God is creator. Book of Genesis. And God made humans in God's own image. Thus, we are to be creative. Well, that's all true. But again, that's not why we have a clown as our logo. That's just icing on the cake. The main reason a clown is our logo is because those who follow the way of Christ should be holy fools. That's why we do church, to try to become holy fools. That's what we are called to do, and to help one another be better and better at becoming holy fools. This week, I went to the kickoff for the United Way campaign. One of the speakers quoted Bayard Rustin, the great civil rights leader. You may not know Bayard Rustin. He kind of was in the shadows of, and kind of let Dr. King and others kind of take the forefront, but he was much of the backbone of the civil rights movement. He was a fascinating man. He was a minority in the 60s, a gay black man fighting for the rights of blacks and gays. Bayard encouraged those who were working for civil rights to be angelic troublemakers. That's a good synonym for holy fools. Angelic troublemakers. Not troublemakers, not people looking to do no good, but angelic troublemakers. People who actually are looking to do good, but it will get them in trouble, or it will cause trouble because it is going against the status quo. Holy fools are angelic troublemakers, and angelic troublemakers are holy fools. Jesus was a holy fool when he had compassion and touched a person who had leprosy when it was against the law to do so. Jesus was a holy fool when he ate with tax collectors and prostitutes. Jesus was a holy fool when he rode into Jerusalem on a donkey to confront those in power. Jesus was a holy fool when he stayed in Jerusalem and allowed himself to be crucified on a cross. And Jesus was a holy fool when he was resurrected from the dead and he danced on his tomb. A young man named Francis was a holy fool when he abandoned his life of luxury for a life devoted to Christianity and became known as Francis of Assisi. You're getting the picture? You see what the church is to be about? Holy fools strive to follow the way of Christ, the teachings of Jesus. Or as Franciscan Richard Rohr, who you heard this morning, calls it, second half living. Howard Lutnick knows what Rohr is talking about. Lutnick is the notoriously hard-edged CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, the financial firm that had their offices at the World Trade Center. Their offices were on the 101st through the 105th floors. Cantor Fitzgerald suffered the greatest loss of life of any company on 9/11. 658 of their 960 employees died. Almost 2/3 of the company. Howard Lutnick's brother was one of the victims, and Lutnick himself would have died had it not been his 5-year-old son's first day of school. Lutnick took his son to school and had a picture taken with him, and Lutnick says, "That's the last picture I have of the old me." "What do you mean?" asked a reporter. "Before 9/11, life was all about winning, all about being successful, having money. That all changed." He went on to say that he recently met a boy whose father worked for the firm and perished in the towers. He said, "I took the boy out to lunch, and for 2 hours I talked with him about his dad and how he was such an incredible person. I would have never done anything like that before." You see, holy fools don't live for the future or live in the past. Holy fools know how to live in the present. They know how to be present with and for others. That's part of second half living. You know, Christianity and clowns have long been linked together. You can go all the way back to the prophets in the Hebrew Scriptures. Those prophets were real holy fools and really angelic troublemakers. They did crazy, radical things as they confronted those who were arrogant and rude and controlling. And then the Apostle Paul takes his holy fool notion to another level in his first letter to the Corinthians. He calls us to be fools for Christ. Now, many people started taking this very seriously. And so monks or other individuals started specifically being known as holy fools. People who would love extravagantly, who would love foolishly. One of the main differences between a monk and a holy fool is that the monk would pull away from society, would withdraw in order to draw closer to God. The holy fool, however, moved towards society, would go to people in order to love extravagantly and to offer radical messages. Crazy fool messages like, if your neighbor strikes you on one cheek, offer him the other as well. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Crazy stuff. So holy fools are busy working for justice and peace, but they also know how to have fun. I'm not talking about having fun at someone else's expense. They can have fun because they're able to laugh at themselves. They don't take themselves too seriously, which is a good way, by the way, to harness one's ego and to practice humility. To recognize our faults and weaknesses and to celebrate the grace of God, that's another message that looks foolish to the world. Holy fools also have fun because they know how blessed they are. They have attitudes of gratitude and know that they have much to be thankful for. So instead of having an attitude of needing more and more and more, it's being thankful for all that we already have. Holy fools also seek to be authentic. That's one reason they can laugh at themselves. The Apostle Paul wrote, "For the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is by the power of God. God chose what is foolish in this world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in this world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised to accomplish God's will." Now, here's one way to interpret this kind of paradox. We will not have experiences of growth and life and transformation. We will not grow strong unless we share our brokenness and our weakness, unless we are authentic. And we will be weak, we will die. Life will lose its meaning and purpose if we are not authentic. If we don't share our weaknesses, if we pretend to be something we're not. And so here is this image of Christ, stripped naked on the cross, broken and beaten, vulnerable to the world. For Paul, that is the process of experiencing life and transformation. Holy fools are not afraid to be weak and vulnerable. I've got a lot of work to do in this area. Been working at it a long time, but it's hard. No one likes to win more than I do, which is not a good quality for a holy fool. I will be very disappointed if the Atlanta Falcons don't win their opening game today. And what's really kind of sick about that is that if they lose, it will ruin my whole day. And it will ruin Sherry's whole night because I'll be cranky. About 22 men bumping heads with one another, 11 of them being named for a bird. It's pretty sick. Sherry will especially tell you it's sick. How can a game like that affect me that way and then affect how I treat Sherry? Call us tonight. See if Sherry's in a good mood. If she's in a good mood, the Falcons won because I'm in a good mood. And vice versa. And what I need to do is after that game, go to Candler Hospital, go to Memorial Medical Center, and walk the halls of the intensive care units and realize what life is about. To realize that there are people who don't care about guys bumping heads with one another. They just want to live another day. We are so obsessed, especially in our country, with being successful and winning at all cost. That's not the Jesus way. That's not being a holy fool. That's not the way of the cross. Holy fools should have fun. They should be authentic. They should be vulnerable. And that's not easy. Being a holy fool is hard because they're often seen as being weak and wrong. They are often ridiculed. A black minister was talking to me this week. He was over at the church, and he's very concerned about the black youth in our city. And he said, Reverend, thank you for the ribbons you are putting up on your fence. They make a powerful statement. I wish we could get more churches to do that so that people could really see what is happening. And then he said, but you know, Rev, there are leaders in Savannah who don't like those ribbons. People in economic development, Pastor, they don't want to see those ribbons on your fence. I never thought about that. He could be right. Some people may not be pleased, but that's part of what comes with trying to be a holy fool. And that's why holy fools also need to be encouragers, great encouragers. We need to lift each other up, not tear each other down. We need all of the help and encouragement we can get to follow in the footsteps of Christ. And so when you come to church, think of yourself as an encourager, determined to lift others up, to help them keep fighting the good fight. The last quality of a holy fool I want to mention is that of a hope bearer. A holy fool believes that the impossible is possible. The holy fool knows that we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. He or she knows that God is ultimately in control and that nothing, not even death, can separate us from God and God's love. And so holy fools can sing and dance because Christ has conquered death. Christ is the Lord of the dance. So even in a world where religious fanatics can fly airplanes in two of the largest buildings in the world to kill 3,000 people, even in a country where on an average day 96 Americans are killed with guns, yet does not even require background checks for firearms purchased at gun shows, even in a city where we usually put up at least one orange ribbon every week, this week 3 of them. Even then, holy fools believe things should and can get better. And perhaps the best words ever spoken about holy fools are words written by St. John Chrysostom. John Chrysostom himself was one of the greatest holy fools of all time. He lived in the 4th and 5th centuries, and he was known for speaking out against those in power. Even the religious leaders he'd speak out against, and he would be sent off in exile. They said, well, John's learned his lesson, so let him come back. And he'd do it again. He'd be sent off in exile, and he'd do it again. He'd come back and do it again. And finally, they said, send him to a place that's so bad, it will kill him. And that's what happened. And this is what John wrote. Only a fool would attempt to change the world with a simple message of love and peace. So we can conclude that Jesus was a fool. Only fools would agree to follow such a man. So we can conclude that all of us are fools. So let all happily admit that we are fools. Then we will happily commit ourselves to change the world. And so come to Asbury, the great circus where holy fools are trained in the teachings of Jesus Christ and encouraged to go out and do God's work to change the world. And let us do it laughing and crying and dancing. Amen and amen.